Get ready to dive deep into one of the most gripping legal battles of our time. I'm your host, Jim Chapman, and today we're unraveling the high-stakes drama surrounding one of the music industry's most enigmatic figures, Sean Diddy Combs. In a case that has captivated millions, the courtroom has become a battleground for fame, fortune, and the dark secrets that lurk beneath the glittering surface of celebrity life. As the gavel comes down, we'll explore the allegations, the testimonies, and the shocking twists that could change the course of Diddy's legacy forever. Was this case merely a clash of lifestyles or something much more sinister? With each episode, I will bring you exclusive insights, analysis, and witness testimony accounts that will leave you on the edge of your seat. So buckle up as we embark on this thrilling ride through the trial of the century, where the stakes are high, the drama is real, and the truth is anything but certain. This is the trial of Sean Combs. Let's get started. And welcome back to this sixth episode in the trial of Diddy. And this is day 2 of that trial. And Sean Combs has entered the courtroom. He was wearing a light-colored crew neck sweater. He hugged some of his lawyers. He greeted his family. They were assembled, of course, in the spectators' gallery. Now, the judge in this case, he came in, and before he allows the jury in, he addressed some of the questions from the media regarding whether they were going to be allowed to stay in the courtroom when the freak-off videos were played. And while he didn't make a ruling on this request, he did say it would likely be a First Amendment violation to allow media to stay in the courtroom as these videos were playing because they depict obvious sexual situations and naked women and all those sorts of things, naked men. But he never made an official ruling, so we'll see how that goes. Now, the last time that I left you, Daniel Phillip was on the stand, and a reminder, Daniel Phillip testified that he was paid to have sex with Cassie Ventura while Sean Combs watched and masturbated, and he's being cross-examined by one of Sean Combs' lawyers, Xavier Donaldson. So Xavier continues that questioning, and he's trying to establish, you can kind of tell this, that Cassandra Ventura was a completely willing participant in these sexual encounters with Phillip. And he asked Phillip, was Ventura the one who paid you? And Phillip replied, yes. He then stated to Phillip she wasn't drunk or high, and Phillip agreed that she was not. Donaldson then asked, is it fair to say she was in complete control of everything she did? And Phillip replied, I can't say that. Daniel Phillip then is questioned about how often he saw Cassie Ventura under the influence of drugs. Now, Phillip testified yesterday that it was only once. And at that time, Combs canceled their planned sexual encounter. And what Xavier Donaldson, Combs' lawyer, is attempting to do here is highlight that the drugs were not a significant part of the sexual relationship between Sean Combs and Cassie. And the reason he's doing that is that issue would speak to consent and whether or not there was any coercion in the relationship between Combs and Ventura. Remember, giving someone drugs to perform sex acts, now that's a blatant example of the need to coerce them. So if it was only one time, Donaldson's trying to make a point that she wasn't coerced. Now, of course, you can coerce someone other than getting them high, but that's a really good example of it. And then Donaldson, he gets into Phillip and his personal feelings for Cassie. And Phillip stated that he wanted their relationship to be deeper than just these voyeuristic sex nights. He said, quote, had she ever given me the chance to date her, I absolutely would have, and that he didn't care if he got paid one way or the other. At that point, Donaldson had no further questions, but the government kept him on the stand for a rebuttal. And Maureen Comey, she gets up and she acknowledged that Cassandra Ventura may have appeared to enjoy herself, if you will, during those sexual encounters. But she doesn't want the jury to forget the testimony about Sean Combs' role in all this and the violence that came along with it. She asked Philip, through all of your sexual activity with Cassie, who was in the room? And Philip responded, Sean Combs, myself, and Cassie. And then Maureen Comey asked him, is Sean Combs the same man who threw a liquor bottle across the room when Cassie asked him to wait a minute? And of course, Philip responded, yes. She then asked Philip to recount his recollection of the moments after he watched Sean Diddy Combs drag Cassie into that bedroom, and then what he heard and believed to be Combs beating Ventura. And he said he experienced erectile dysfunction because he said he was totally shook up by that altercation. Quote, I was completely shocked and messed up in my head. There was nothing I could do. She was afraid, and I could see she was afraid. It almost sounded like this guy was falling in love with Cassie, right? And with that, Daniel Phillip left the stand. And then the lawyers go into a sidebar and something very interesting happens. Apparently, Combs' defense wanted to bar the next witness, who incidentally, y'all, is Cassie Ventura herself. The defense wanted to bar her husband from court during her testimony. Teeny Gergos, she made an application that Cassie Ventura's husband was being barred from the courtroom for her testimony. And her reasoning for that was she said Ventura's husband may be called in Combs' defense if certain testimony came up when Ventura took the stand. Gergos said the defense will not make an application to bar any other family members of Ventura from the courtroom for her testimony, but they didn't want her husband in there. She also stated Ventura's brother and mother are expected to be in the courtroom to support her. But the prosecution, of course, they pushed back. They said Ventura needed her support system in full there. And I totally agree with them while she's on the stand. And after a few minutes, they met in the middle. The prosecution agreed that her husband would lead for Ventura's testimony regarding the allegation that Combs raped her in 2018, but he could stay throughout the rest of the testimony, which also told us that that topic was going to come up. Really no surprise. And then it happened. The government called their star witness, if you will, to this entire case, Cassandra Ventura. And remember, without her civil lawsuit being filed, we wouldn't be here right now. This podcast certainly would not be going right now as it relates to Sean Combs, because it was that civil case that I covered first, way back in early 2024. So Ventura enters the courtroom, the jury's present, and she's visibly pregnant. She's actually in her third trimester. And incidentally, before we get into it, I do want to say she's very happy right now. I checked out her Instagram. She's in love with her husband. They've been married a little while now. She's given him some beautiful kids, and I was happy to see that. So she enters that courtroom, and as soon as she does, Combs turns back in his chair and stares her down as she walks in and glares at her. Now, Cassie Ventura's husband, whose name is Alex Fine, he then walks into the courtroom and he sits next to Doug Wingder, who is Ventura's attorney. And I love it because from what I understand, he stared Combs down the whole time. So for this round of questioning, prosecutor Emily Johnson is handling the questioning for the government, and she shows Cassie Ventura a photo of Sean Diddy Combs, and he asked her to identify him, which she does. Johnson then asked Cassie how she knew Sean Combs, And she said, we were in a relationship for a little over 10 years. Johnson then asked Cassie to describe that relationship with Combs, to which Cassie said, quote, there were violent arguments that would usually result in some sort of physical abuse, dragging, different things of that nature. And she said some of their arguments would be violent and result in some sort of physical abuse. Quote, he would smash me in my head, knock me over, drag me, kick me, stomp me in the head if I was down. Johnson asked, how frequently was physical violence in your relationship? And Ventura responded, too frequently. Ventura said she suffered bruises from the abuse, including knots on her forehead, busted lips, bruises all over her body, black eyes, etc. Cassie is then asked to describe what a freak-off is, and boy, they jumped right into it. And she responded by saying it basically entails the hiring of an escort and setting up this experience so that I can perform for Sean. Johnson then asked how she and Combs started doing freak-offs. Cassie said, quote, within the first year of our relationship, he proposed the idea, this sexual encounter that he called voyeurism, where he would watch me be in intercourse with a third party, specifically with another man. Ventura went on to say that the freak-off would entail hiring an escort and setting up this experience so I could perform for Sean. She said she couldn't remember where the name freak-off came from, but she said Sean introduced it to her. Quote, eventually it became a job for me pretty much, so I knew if it was something he wanted me to do, I had the contacts to set it up and get a hotel room and all that. But in the beginning, Sean set it up. He was in charge. Johnson then asked her how the freak-offs made her feel. And Cassie said she felt a weird sense of responsibility. It was him sharing something like that with me. I was confused. I was nervous, but I also loved him very much and I wanted to make him happy. I knew it wasn't something I wanted to be doing, especially as regular as it became. But again, I was just in love and I wanted to make him happy. Ventura said she did not know how to refuse the freak-offs. Quote, it got to the point where I just didn't feel like I had much of a choice. Didn't really know what to do or who to turn to. She said that partying with Sean Combs and freak-offs took a big chunk of my life. She recalled staying up for days on end, drinking, taking drugs, and having sex with strangers. The freak-offs ranged from roughly 36 hours to 4 days, though they could last longer with breaks. She said then she would need to recover from the drugs, dehydration, and sleep deprivation. Quote, the freak-offs became a job. There was no space to do anything else but to recover and just try to feel normal again. She said Combs controlled a lot of her life, from her career to the way he dressed. Quote, I just didn't feel like I had much say in it at the time, being really super young, naive, and a total people pleaser. I didn't know if he would be upset enough to be violent or if he would write me off and just not want to be with me at all. Cassie said those events caused her nervousness and confusion. She said she didn't understand how all these encounters could be a turn on, but she felt a responsibility to please Combs. She went on to say, ultimately, Sean controlled a lot of her life. Over time, the videos he shot of me during sexual encounters were blackmail materials, which I feared could be put on the internet. He had so many resources to do that. She was so scared of this, in fact, that she testified she kept broken laptops, iPads, and phones because she had no idea what material was on them. She also said Sean is a really polarizing person. He's also very charming. So it's hard to be able to decide in that moment, like what you need when he's telling you what he wants. Cassandra Ventura was asked what she knew of Sean Combs when she met him around 2005 when she was just 19 years old. And she stated, quote, "I just knew that he was a larger-than-life entrepreneur, a musician. I was a fan of his music. I didn't know too much about him personally." She said soon after that, she signed a 10-album deal with Combs' label, Bad Boy Records. And y'all, she's speaking very softly on the stand at this point. She's lifting a tissue to dab at her nose and her eyes, and you can see she's kind of starting to get upset. She said early on she had a platonic relationship with Combs. She said he looked out for her when she had some rough performances. She went on to say that she saw Diddy about once a month at social outings in 2006. And then in August of 2007, while celebrating her 21st birthday in Vegas, Combs kissed her in a bathroom. She said, quote, "I was really confused at the time. I was a young new artist, and I just didn't really know the lay of the land when it came to things like that." She said after he kissed her, she cried and ran off. Johnson then asked, "Did you want Sean to kiss you on your 21st birthday?" And Cassie answered, "No, not on my 21st birthday." She went on to say he called most of the shots. Well, all of the shots. The prosecutor then asked her to describe her life early on dating Diddy. And she said that after he kissed her on her 21st birthday, Combs began inviting her to hotel rooms in New York, where he stayed while his home was being renovated. She said they started to develop a more comfortable relationship with each other. Quote, "I wanted to be around Sean for the same reasons as everyone else at the time. He was this exciting, entertaining, fun guy that also happened to have my career in his hands. It felt special because not a lot of people got that time with Sean Combs." Ventura described herself as being sexually unexperienced at the time. During one of those New York visits, she said Combs performed oral sex on her, and then he made her, quote, "feel crazy for not reciprocating. I didn't even have the vocabulary for some of the things that we talked about." She added, "I was also still in a relationship with someone else." She said eventually Combs, Ventura, and other friends took a trip to Miami. Ventura said at that trip in Miami, she took an ecstasy pill called a Blue Dolphin that Combs gave her while they were drinking and partying on a boat. Ventura said that was the night she and Combs had sex for the first time on that boat. And for those of you that may be curious about what a Blue Dolphin ecstasy pill is, it's light blue with white and a few dark blue speckles. It's often stamped with a dolphin emblem, hence the name. And the pill is part of ecstasy tablets that are marketed with different icons and logos, such as pink Honda, blue martini, and white dolphin. The Blue Dolphin pill has gained notoriety as one of the most popular ecstasy pills globally, with festival goers frequently consuming it. So there you have it. Thank you, ChatGPT. And we'll continue on. She said that after that trip and the first time they had sex, she became one of Sean Combs' girlfriends. She said Sean Combs at that time had many girlfriends. I knew that we were spending a lot of time together one-on-one, and I really felt like we were in a monogamous relationship for at least some period of time. Their relationship wasn't public for years, she said, because she was his artist and because of his family. She went on to say that, quote, "This lifestyle was much different. He had assistants at his beck and call. He could get anything done quickly. He had respect from everyone, and he traveled quite a bit." She said she fell in love with Combs. "I traveled with him everywhere. I was in his studios. I was just like his little shadow for a little while," she testified. Ventura said at this point their relationship was fun, describing it as her first real adult relationship. And she noted that Combs' lifestyle was much different than her own. She said early on in their relationship, Sean Combs wanted Cassie to call him by her grandfather's name. Let me say that again. Early on, Combs wanted Cassie to call him her grandfather's name. How freaky is that? He asked me what I called my grandfather, and I said, quote, Pop Pop. I thought it was weird at the time, and now I just feel like it was disrespectful. She said he called her Cece, which she said stood for Cassie Combs. Early on, I was just enamored by him, but later on, I began to experience a different side of him, which was his abusive side. She said on a typical day, she talked to Sean Combs all day, throughout the day. She said sometimes she wouldn't answer his calls or messages right off, and he would be an incessant caller, or he would have his staff call her until she answered. She said there were times Combs' assistants or security personnel would locate her for him in person. Prosecutor Emily Johnson then asked Ventura to give an example of how Combs' moods impacted her. And Ventura said Combs' moods would swing different ways quite a bit. Quote, the most complicated and the greatest examples are the abuse, because I also felt at certain times when I knew it wasn't even about me, that if I made the wrong face, the next thing you knew, I was getting hit in the face. She said Sean Combs would check in on what music she was working on, and he would give her what she called busy work on projects that never were released. She said, quote, I think the busy work, just the way I interpreted it, was just control over what I was doing over every minute of the day. Ventura said that if she didn't respond to Combs, he would call her constantly and sometimes send someone, usually his security, to her home to check on her. She said his security personnel was around 24 hours a day. Quote, security protected him and kept an eye on me all at the same time. Cassie Ventura then said she was asked to describe the complicated side of her relationship with Diddy. She testified that she thought they were in a monogamous relationship at one point, but soon realized they were not. Quote, I didn't get that he was him. He was Puff Daddy, and Puff Daddy has many women. And she said she felt jealous about seeing him with other women. Quote, he likes the company of women, and I just really had to learn that over time, despite what he would tell me was just between us. She continued by saying he made me feel like we were in a monogamous relationship. More often than not, it was really me figuring out that we were not. She said eventually she moved to Los Angeles full-time from New York to be closer to Sean Combs, saying he wanted to be near his kids, so she went too. Quote, I moved because I was in love and I wanted to be near him. When she lived in Los Angeles, Cassie Ventura said she had her own apartment, but Sean Combs had keys and used them whenever he wanted. Quote, it was a stomach in knots moment when he visited, she said, because she never knew what kind of mood Combs would be in, whether he would yell and bang on the door or if he would come in smooth and in control. She said others around her noticed Combs' control and they said things to her. She testified her manager, James Cruz, who was an employee of Bad Boy Records, told her that he was managing her with one hand tied behind his back. She said he meant that decisions about her career also had to go through Combs, who was not only the head of the record label, but also her boyfriend. She said she spent a lot of time grooming herself for the freak-offs. Quote, I had to look a certain way, adding that the tenor of his comments about her appearance would have a major effect on her self-confidence over time. And at times in their relationship, Cassandra Ventura said Sean Combs or his security would take away her electronic devices, including her laptop or phone. She said she would get him back eventually. Quote, It depended on how long I was being punished for. He would always give them back if I agreed to go to his house. She went on to say I would get my car taken away. I got kicked out of the house. I got kicked out of my apartment. I had jewelry taken from me. It was very random depending on how Sean felt. The prosecution then shifted to focus on the associates of Sean Combs with whom Cassandra Ventura had contact with. One of those was Tony Fletcher, a former bad boy executive. Ventura said she discussed financial issues with her. Another is Christina Karam, who was the chief of staff for Combs and knew the in and outs of Ventura's schedule. Also, the prosecutor brought up a security guard by the name of D-Rock. And Ventura got asked about who he was, and she said he was one of the people who went looking for her when Combs did not know her location. Cassandra Ventura then testified about a time in which she said she and Sean Combs were having a freak-off at one of his homes in Los Angeles when that same security guard, D-Rock, he alerts Combs that Suge Knight, a longtime music industry rival, was at a diner in the city. She said they immediately started getting ready to go meet him, which made her scream and cry in fear. They all left in an SUV, and she was handed a gun to put in her purse. She said it wasn't the only time she was asked to handle a gun for Combs, which terrified her. And of course, for those of you that may not know, Suge Knight is the founder of Death Row Records and also the other individual shot when Tupac Shakur was shot and killed in Las Vegas. He was actually driving Tupac from a Mike Tyson fight, and they were headed to one of Suge Knight's nightclubs in Las Vegas when that shooting went down, and many believe Pac was killed as a result of a bounty placed on his head by Sean Combs. That's not confirmed. That's just what a lot of people believe. Cassie went on to say there was always cash and jewelry and sometimes tapes, SD cards from cameras, guns. Depending on the safe, it would have all those things in it. She testified she saw handguns in Combs' residences in New York, Los Angeles, Miami, and Alpine, New Jersey. And obviously the prosecution is trying to show that Sean Combs is a violent person. The handguns thing, look, I'm in South Louisiana. Everybody, all of us down here in the dirty South got at least 10 guns apiece. So it doesn't necessarily mean you're a violent person because you got a lot of guns. It could be for protection. It could be because you like to shoot guns and you enjoy it. But I see what they're trying to do. The prosecutor then turned the conversation back to voyeurism and freak-offs, and she asked Cassie when she first learned about Combs' fascination with voyeurism. And before we get into that, I want to say, the prosecution is all women. It's 6 awesome prosecutors, all female. And initially when this case started, I was curious as to why. Not that there's anything wrong with it. These are top-notch lawyers, but I was curious as to why they chose an all-female prosecution team. And now I think I've figured it out already. This stuff is so sensitive. What we're about to get into, I think it would have came off differently if a man would have been questioning Cassie Ventura. Just my thoughts, but we'll continue on. So the prosecutor asked her about Combs' fascination, apparently, with voyeurism, and Cassie said Diddy presented it to her within the first 6 months of them dating as a fantasy. She said he would want to see me with another male having sexual interaction. He also brought up swinging. Ventura said she was shocked when Combs first told her about the voyeurism. Quote, I didn't know how to react. I didn't want to upset him if I said that it scared me or if I said anything outside of, okay, let's try it. She went on to say for their first freak-off, Sean Combs arranged for a dancer from Las Vegas to have sex with Cassie. She said they took ecstasy and drank alcohol. She added that she felt very dirty and confused after that, but she felt she couldn't say no to continuing the encounters. Quote, I didn't want to make him upset. Quote, I didn't want to make him angry and regret telling me about this experience that was so personal. After the freak-off started, Ventura said they became almost weekly. She testified that the freak-offs could last 2 to 3 days with no sleep despite her desire to get rest. Drugs help keep us all awake. She went on to say they would take ecstasy or cocaine and that Combs would give it to her. Choking back tears, she said the encounters made her feel disgusting and humiliated. She said Combs was a different person during those events. Quote, and listen to this, his eyes go black. The version of him I was in love with no longer existed there, unquote. And let me say this. So she's talking about now these 3-4 day freak-offs. High the whole time. And you're so basically blasted by the end of this thing that it takes you 4 or 5 days to recover. And as an entrepreneur and an owner of several media businesses, it makes me wonder, how the hell did Sean Combs have time for this? I mean, he's a billionaire. I'm nowhere near a billionaire. Hell, I can't find time to eat dinner half the time with friends, much less have 4-day freak-offs. I guess it's the entrepreneur in me. I'm just like, man, where do you get time to do this? But I'll move on. She said Combs would decide when the freak-offs would end. He'd tell her at some point a session would be the last one, and she'd think, hopefully, that will be the last one. The prosecutor then asked her what she enjoyed, if anything, about the freak-offs. And Cassie, at this point, broke down in tears. She said, quote, the time I spent with him. She added that she felt like it was the only time she could have with him. Quote, I felt disgusting. I was humiliated. I didn't have the words to put together at the time about how horrible I really felt, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. She said she tried to gently bring it up, not wanting to do the freak-offs anymore with Sean Combs, but she said I didn't want to upset him or make him angry with me for even sharing it. I would just tread lightly when I brought it up. Sometimes I would just email him about it because I didn't want anything bad to happen, meaning she was scared he'd beat the shit out of her if she explained that she didn't want to do these freak-offs anymore. Remember, Sean Combs don't like to be told no. The jury was then shown an email exchange in which Cassie made a sexual invitation to Combs, and Combs responds by saying, "Want me to call someone?" referring to an escort. And she replied in that email that she just wanted to be with him. And she wrote that she wanted to talk to him about something too. And he responds back, now you don't want to do any more freak-offs. I already know. And then he added, you're so predictable. And what's he doing there? He's trying to degrade her for not wanting to do that stuff anymore. She was then asked by the prosecutor to list the places in which they would have the freak-offs, the cities, etc. And she said they occurred mostly in hotels in New York City, Miami, Los Angeles, Atlanta, Las Vegas, Turks and Caicos. And she said sometimes she booked the hotel rooms. She said Tony Fletcher, a bad boy employee, would book them. And typically they would book them under pseudonyms, including Frank Black and Frank White. And you may wonder, why is this important? Where they had them, what cities? Well, remember the charges, y'all, sex trafficking. The government has to prove people specifically traveled to different places, different cities, different states to participate in these freak-offs. So the locations are extremely important. She was asked about how Combs would make her alter her appearance for the freak-offs, and she testified that she was made to get a wax, a tan, get her nails done. Her nails had to be painted white or with a white French tip, and that was per Combs' instructions. She also described getting piercings at Combs' suggestion, and she's talking about nipple piercings. Ventura said she would wear see-through netted outfits and, quote, extremely high heels. The prosecutor then asked her about the details that led up to the freak-offs, etc. And Cassie said assistants and security guards would stock the room with condoms, baby oil, and Astroglide. And she said that was a type of lubricant. She testified that Sean Combs asked that the baby oil be heated and that he wanted her, quote, glistening with it, requiring that she apply it in frequent intervals. Ventura said they used somewhere around 10 large bottles of baby oil per freak-off. She said when they ran out of lubricant during a freak-off, they would call someone on Combs' staff or the hotel desk to bring more. Combs would call an assistant himself or direct Ventura to call them. And keep in mind that law enforcement, they seized more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant during searches of Combs' homes in Miami and LA last year. Ventura went on to say the freak-off encounters were very choreographed, experiences directed specifically by Sean Combs. She described one instance where Sean Combs asked her to get into a blown-up pool filled with baby oil inside a hotel room. She said she was wearing her clothes and shoes and didn't want to, but, quote, at that point, I couldn't say no because she worried about his temper, something that Sean wanted to happen, quote, that was going to happen. The prosecutor, Emily Johnson, then asked Cassie for a detailed description of what a hotel room would look like after the freak-offs. And wait till you hear this. Ventura said there would be baby oil all over the walls and the door handles. There would sometimes be blood on the linens because she was expected to have freak-offs while menstruating, and there could be urine on the sheets because Sean Combs would sometimes direct an escort to urinate on her. She did not want this to happen, she said, but there were no conversations about her preferences. It was a turn-on for him, so it happened. The prosecutor then said, why didn't you say no when it happened? And Cassie responded with, I thought it was obvious that I didn't want to do it. Cassie said that she would try to clean up a bit, and typically they'd leave a really good tip. I bet they would. Many times one of Sean Diddy Combs' staff members would go in and clean up some more. Combs was often charged by hotels for the damages, Ventura said. She recalled hearing Combs' staff members take calls from hotels about the matter. One specific time, Ventura recalled the Intercontinental in New York charging Combs a really high number for damages to a hotel room. The prosecutor then asked Cassie about how they went about finding the escorts for the freak-offs. And Cassie testified that Diddy tasked her with finding escorts for the freak-offs and that Combs had very specific physical requirements for the men. Ventura said she'd find escorts by responding to ads on Craigslist and Backpage at Combs' direction. And it was at that point the jury reviewed a text message conversation between Ventura and a man that she said would facilitate escorts. And the man said he would send her photos of men that she could hire. And she went on to say, I'd usually show them to Sean and see if that person was of interest for a freak-off. Combs had to approve the escorts, and I definitely had to show him. She went on to say that as time went along, they eventually found a service called Cowboys for Angels, which had a website that offered male escorts. And the defense noted that the service was far from underground. It was featured in a Showtime reality series actually called Gigolos. Ventura testified that she would tell the escorts that it was her, quote, husband's fantasy to watch her having sex with another man. And Cassie said the escorts were paid in cash, typically $1,500 all the way up to $6,000, and that sometimes Sean Combs brought the cash, sometimes a member of his security team brought the cash. She said the escorts were almost always men with only a few exceptions. Cassie then described how she would vet a new escort if they hadn't used that escort before. She said Sean would want her to, quote, clarify if that person was a cop or not. The prosecutor then has Cassie run through a list of a ton of escorts who she says participated in freak-offs, sometimes traveling to get there. And the men used names, common names like Dave, and then some different names like Jules, and then one guy's name was, quote, the Punisher. Whoa. Prosecutor Emily Johnson then showed the jury photos of some of the escorts who participated in freak-offs. Some of those pictured participated in freak-offs in multiple states, Cassie Ventura testified. And that right there, that's trafficking, right? Ventura said that the escort's travel was sometimes coordinated by her and sometimes by a travel agent and sometimes by the escort himself. Ventura testified she would tell Combs' travel agent that she needed to arrange travel for a new staff member when she needed to fly an escort in for a freak-off. Now, she also testified that she used drugs at every freak-off and took all kinds of drugs, including ecstasy, marijuana, and mushrooms. She said, quote, for me, it was disassociative and numbing. I couldn't imagine myself doing any of that without having some sort of buffer or just some way to not feel it for what it really was. She said Combs provided the drugs and sometimes his staff would drop them off, saying, quote, someone would drop off drugs to me wherever I was. She said the drugs often made her feel sick. Sometimes, she said, she would feel like she wanted to vomit, saying, quote, if we were in a freak-off, he would be encouraging me to get up and continue with it, even in that condition. Unbelievable. So then the prosecutor asked Ventura to describe the pattern that most of these freak-offs followed. And Ventura said it was established pretty early on in doing the freak-offs that Sean enjoyed a lot of conversation and describing. Cassie said a freak-off would typically start with oil and touching. After that, she said participants would engage in oral sex before progressing into intercourse, saying it was, quote, a gradual process. Cassie said she would often ask Combs if they could move into the next act in that pattern, saying she wanted to speed up the process and get it over with, and again stated he was controlling the whole situation. He was directing it like a director would direct a movie. She further said, I felt like I was an object. I was being heavily objectified by men in that scenario. And if you look real deep into where the prosecution is taking the line of questioning with Cassie, you can see it as clear as day. They're highlighting the control that Combs possessed. Sean Combs' level of control is really the undercurrent of just about the entire testimony thus far as it relates to the freak-offs. So continuing with the testimony of Cassie, she testified that Sean Combs was often in the room or right beside her during these freak-offs. And if he wasn't in the room, he would even sometimes watch over FaceTime. She said within the first year of the encounters, he began recording the freak-offs, saying at first they were recorded on a video camera, and later they were recorded on both his and her electronic devices such as cell phones, and that she often asked for them to be deleted or she would delete them herself, saying, quote, I never wanted anyone to see me like that. She said there wasn't really a conversation before he began recording. She said Sean just brought out a camera, set it up. She went on to say she would choke after men urinated in her mouth, and she would raise her hand to beg for it to stop. She said escorts were actually paid less if they ejaculated at times other than when Sean Combs directed them to. And then she gets into that 2016 hotel hallway altercation, which she said started as a freak-off. And that's the first time we found that out. She said it got violent and I chose to leave. Sean followed me into the hallway by the elevators. He grabbed me, threw me on the ground, kicked me, tried to drag me back to the room, and took my stuff. And she went on to elaborate on that. She said a couple of days before this, she was scheduled to have her first big movie premiere. She said Combs had sent a text message that she interpreted as him wanting a freak off. As damage control, she said she told him she would do it, saying, quote, "If I pleased him with a freak off, then my premiere is going to run smoothly." So an escort named Jules was there during this altercation in 2016. And she said it was also during that freak off that Combs beat her and gave her a black eye. She testified, "At this point, all I could think about was getting out there safely." And if you'll remember, the first person who testified in this trial that I just covered, he said that she had a black eye, a purplish eye was his comment. So the video of that altercation in the hallway was then shown again, and Cassie walked the jury through it from her perspective. She said after Combs threw her to the ground, she covered her face and stayed on the ground because she didn't want him to do any more damage than he had already done with her eye, right? The prosecutor asked her how many times Combs had thrown her to the ground like that in their history of being together. And she responded with, quote, "Too many to count." Johnson then asked her, quote, "Are there occasions when you tried to fight back when Sean hit you?" And Cassie responded with, "No way." And with that, they adjourned court for Tuesday, May 13th. And they will pick back up Wednesday, May 14th, with continuing testimony from Cassandra Ventura. And that's just what we're going to do in the next episode you hear. And what a day today was. The things we found out that have never been known before. Absolutely shocking. Thank you all for listening to our continued coverage of the trial of Sean Combs. Remember to hit that follow button wherever you're listening. That way you'll be alerted as we drop these episodes. Shout out to my Patreon celebrity members. Look, even these episodes, which we record, edit, produce, and drop all on the same day, these Patreon celebrity members get them commercial free and early, at least a couple of hours early in this case. So consider following us and supporting the show on Patreon. You can do it for as little as $2.50 a week. And I can't tell you how far that goes into ensuring that we continue to bring you quality content. And until next time, for Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.